Candice James, all the way from the West Coast, and you're listening to CKUW FM 95.9, and this is the PI Poetry Show with your host, Carmelo Militano, where we interrogate, investigate, and speculate poetry. Welcome, Candice.
I'm so pleased to be here.
Well, that's great. I'm glad somebody's pleased to be here. Before we start, Candice, I'm going to quickly read over your bio. Now, Candice James is currently in her third year term as a Poet Laureate of New Westminster, BC. She's past president of the Federation of BC Writers, past president of the Royal Society of Literary Arts, and author of 9 books of poetry. Her first book of poetry, Asplit, did I say that? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Asplit in the Water. That almost lends itself to something else, but we won't talk about that. It was published in 1979 by Fiddlehead Poetry Books, a great poetry house, Fiddlehead, by the way, yes. University of New Brunswick, and her latest book is Merging Dimensions, published by Ekstasis Editions, 2015. By the way, folks, your host was published by Ekstasis. Richard Olson is the editor.
Yes.
And Candice is also a visual artist, musician, singer, songwriter, workshop facilitator, and mentor to new and emerging poets. She's a full member of both the League of Canadian Poets and the Writers' Union of Canada. Well, quite a pedigree. Welcome. But my question, though, Candice, is can you make a good sandwich?
Sometimes, if the ingredients are available.
I'm kidding. I'm just joking around. So you're doing a tour. You were, I know we were talking informally earlier that you've driven all the way in from Regina, and you've been reading your poems and promoting your new book. And I guess my first question would be, how's this book different? Now you've written 9 books, so how's this book different from the other kinds of books you've written before?
Well, the other books, most of them are free verse, and they have a myriad of variety of different themes, and not even theme, they're just basically a bunch of different scenarios of poems. There are 2 that are form poetry. One is a book of sonnets, okay, and another one is a book of villanelles. And then there is another one that is a book called Ekstasis, and that's a local artist who's really done very well over all the years he's made a living at it.
That almost begs a question. I have no idea what Ekstasis is. That sounds like a mining technique.
This is interesting. Ekphrastic poetry is, well, anything ekphrastic is mixing one art with another. So when Keats wrote Ode to a Grecian Urn, he saw the urn that was an artistic piece.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And he wrote a poem inspired by the urn. So that's called ekphrastic poetry.
Yeah, from the Greek. Yes. I get it now. Yeah.
Except I thought that sounded too harsh, ekphrastic. So I thought, I think I should call it ekphrasticism. Mm-hmm. So I looked it up on Google, and there's no such word. But I thought, you know what, poetic license. I'm going to call it ekphrasticism.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think part of being a poet is getting to do what you want.
So that book has all Don's paintings on one page, and my poem to each painting on the facing page.
Right.
So it's quite interesting.
So is that how this stuff works? Your new collection, or is that a different book that you're talking about?
That's a different book.
All right. So how's this book different from that? What are you doing here that's a little...
This is...
Was this something you'd been thinking about for many years? Was this something you... I'm curious of the process, how one comes about discovering the theme.
Well, what happened was I painted a painting, and it's actually on the cover of the book. It's like 2 dimensions, and one dimension's on top of the other, so here's this dimension, and then this is the new other city and dimension coming in. You can't see as well on the back, but you can see here the trees in this one, and the trees up there in the other. So overlapping dimensions. Okay. And there's another word that doesn't exist called dimensionalization. So,
and then of course there is dementia.
Yeah, which I'm getting close to having soon. But I painted that painting, and I really liked the painting. And when Richard said he would do a book, Ekstasis was going to do a book, I thought, well, I wonder if he'll use that painting. I'd like to use that as the cover. Right. And he took a look and he said, sure, we can use that.
Okay.
So I called it the title of the painting, Merging Dimensions, and then I realized I don't have, after I put everything together along that line of dimensions and surrealism and two dimensions. I realized I didn't have a poem called Merging Dimensions, and I like to have a title poem. So then I wrote Merging Dimensions, and it's in the middle of the book, because I never like at the beginning. I like to hide a title poem in the book.
It's kind of like it's like looking for a treat. You sort of work your way towards it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
So tell us something. Are there more than one theme, or is there a variety of themes? I know we spoke before we came on the show that you had several different things going on in this book. Can you maybe tell us a little about that?
Well, how it starts is, the first poem is called Dreamscape, and I enter the dreamscape, and as I enter the dreamscape, I see another entity in this dreamscape, and they ask me where I've been.
Very Dante-esque, I mean, because Dante enters into the underworld. He's led there by Virgil. So you're tapping into, my sense, archetypes of some kind. Anyway, go on. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's okay. Maybe that was a past life.
Interesting.
And then as the book goes on, it delves into like ghostliness, surreal. Is that really there? Concentrating. When you concentrate, the harder you concentrate, everything, it's all there, and then really concentrate, and it just slips away, but it's still there. Everything around you that's ethereal.
Okay.
And then the last poem ends up, it's called I've Been Dead. So I travel into that dreamscape again.
Right.
And the person is there, and they say, where have you been?
Yeah.
And I explain where I've been.
Well, I noticed at the beginning of the book that you blurred Charles Baudelaire.
I love that.
And you must, and I was guessing, you're a big fan, I could see you sort of beaming with satisfaction.
Yes.
When I mentioned his name. I know a little of his work, Le Fleur des Bals, in translation. Now, do you read him in French? Do you read him in English?
English.
Okay. Yeah. And do you remember in one of his books he calls he says something about ennui. He's the enemy of the dainty monster.
Oh yes, yeah.
Do you know that poem?
Yeah, I ennui and the little monster.
He calls it the dainty monster.
Yes, and as if there could be one that's that dainty.
Well, normally it's not.
No.
But I guess where I'm going with this is how did Baudelaire play an influence in that kind of cityscape, dreamscape in some of your work?
Well, I've read his work.
Be true to your own poetic instincts, or would you say something else?
Well, I'd have to go a little further. I'd have to find out what kind of poetry are you writing. You know, I'd need to know kind of like where you're at. Like, are they in grade 1, or are they just picking up a pencil for the first time, or are they in grade 9?
Right. So different, depending on your stage, would be different kinds of advice.
Yes. Yes.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Like I do a course. It's not a course. It's a one-day presentation. I don't do it very often because it's not that I don't really know why I don't, but I only limit it to 10 to 12 people max.
Well, it's probably because it's manageable.
Yeah, and it's called memorization and presentation, because all my poetry that I do when I'm out featuring is I've got it memorized.
Right.
And people always say to me, oh, how do you do that? It must be so hard. And I said, no, it's not hard. It is not difficult. But it is work.
Yeah.
It's work. It takes time. You've got to keep at it, go over it until it's always there. Now, rhyming ones are easier to hold on to than non-rhyming. But the non-rhyming has got to be like a movie in your head.
Right.
And the rhyming, well, of course, you've got the ending rhymes that are going to help you a lot more. So I teach them how to do it, and you know what? They're amazed. When they leave, they've got 2 poems memorized that they've never heard before in their life.
And the really interesting thing about that sort of thing is we have an expression that we say to know something by heart. And that's so much, I think, that phrase speaks to what poetry is. It's really knowledge of the heart.
Yes.
You know, I'm not sure. I'm sure as a poet you know what I'm talking about.
Well, if you've got it memorized, you can really portray it. You can really deliver it.
And it comes out of here, right?
Yes, because you don't have to read it off the paper.
Yeah, exactly. That's really lovely. We are, I should tell our listeners what we're doing here, in case they've just tuned in. You're listening to CKUW 95.9 FM, and your host, Carmelo Militano. And my guest today is Candice James, who's talking about poetry, and specifically her collection, Merging Dimensions. And I think this is the perfect time for you to maybe read a poem or two, if you don't mind.
What I'd like to do is I'd like to read a poem that starts it, because these are short, and the poem that ends it, and I'm one in between, and that kind of gives you a
That's
full
perfect. We're a little past the halfway mark here, and this is the best time for you to do this.
Okay, so it starts with Dreamscape.
Okay.
I entered the dreamscape, and there you were. White shirt, blue striped tie, rosy cheeks, gray hair speckled with white, silver glasses glinting, framing questioning eyes, surprising the bandit smile, tugging at your lips. Where have you been? You asked. I've been writing poems on Earth, I answered. Then the dream broke, swallowed you into the other dimension, gone in an instant. I see you everywhere now. Your image is burned into my soul. I know you, but I can't remember where or when. Can't remember your real name. Tonight, I'll enter the dreamscape again, searching for my meaning, searching